Good morning, everyone. My name is Kathya Alonzo, and today's topic is going to be about allocating organs to cognitively impaired patients. Definition. Opponents believe that cognitive impairment is one of several legitimate criteria on which allocation decisions may be based. Because this makes a decision to transplant an organ into patients with cognitive impairment, and this will often mean to another patient with no impairment will die for lack of a transplant. Proponents of transplantation for such patients argue that cognitive function should not be a basis for allocating organs because it allows healthcare providers to decide that some lives are more valuable than others.
Each year, thousands of people receive a life-saving organ transplant, with thousands more receiving life-changing tissue transplants, such as a cornea to help them see again, or a bone transplant to help restore mobility. This is only made possible because people are willing to help others by donating their organs or tissue when they die. So how does it work? Many conditions and illnesses can lead to an organ failing, and if you suffer from one of these, you may require a donated organ to replace your failing one. If this is the case, you will be assessed to see if an organ transplant is the best treatment option for you, and if you meet the criteria, you will be added to the UK's transplant waiting list. This list contains the details of everyone in the UK who has been assessed for and meets the criteria for a transplant. This national system allows donated organs to be matched to the best possible recipient and offered to their doctor. For patients and their families, the wait on the transplant list can be long and unpredictable. It can take a long time for a suitable organ to become available, and while waiting for that life-changing phone call, patients can become too sick to receive a transplant, or worse, die without getting the organ they need. Right now, around 6,000 seriously ill people are waiting for a life-saving transplant, and many will die before a suitable organ becomes available. You can give hope to patients who are waiting by registering as an organ donor. Joining the NHS Organ Donor Register is the best way to ensure your decision is honoured when you die. Go to organdonation.nhs.uk and sign up now and tell your family you want to give the gift of life.
Application in medicine. Organ donation is a life alternative for people who suffer from any pathology, because their body does not work properly, so it requires an organ or tissue. Organ transplantation is considered an act of solidarity and helping those in need. This topic emphasizes the importance of social support in listing decisions and reminds us that persons with disabilities merit provision of auxiliary aids and services to enhance their candidacy for any public good, including transplantation of organs.
It's not a list. When we think about lists and what that means to us, I think we tend to think of standing in line or waiting on a first-come, first-served basis. And the waiting list isn't really a list in that sense that we think of lists. It is a pool of candidates who are waiting organ transplants, and we collect information about those candidates, information about the candidate's age, information about their blood type. But we also collect information about the donor that would be most appropriate from an age perspective, from a height and weight perspective, and in some cases from a medical or social history perspective. And when a donor becomes available, a list is generated within our UNet system in DonorNet, and that dynamically created list is the list that we allocate organs from. And so we're looking at information about the donors and information about the candidates, and we find those best matches and create that list dynamically. So the more donors we have, the more lists we can generate. The more organ offers we can make, the more transplants we make happen, the more lives we save.
Pros and cons. The pros are that given the scarcity of organs, such denials are appropriate even if the patient's families will derive great meaning from extending the life of their loved one. But the cons are that although transplant centers are appropriately given primary authority to accept or decline patients for the waiting list, there are few mechanisms to hold such centers accountable for the decisions.
Today, we will be discussing the basics of organ rejection. But before we do that, we must first understand a little bit about the immune system. The immune system functions to protect your body against all foreign bodies, which include bacteria and viruses. But how does the immune system work exactly? The immune system recognizes the presence of bacteria or viruses by identifying specialized proteins on their surfaces called antigens. If the immune system detects a threat, it activates an immune response which attacks the foreign body. Now, let's talk about organ transplantation. Organ transplantation is often the only treatment for end-stage organ failures. In Canada, there are over 2,000 organ transplantation surgeries every single year. However, the demand for donor organs continues to outnumber the supply, as thousands of Canadians remain on the waiting list for organ transplants every single year. So what exactly causes organ rejection? All tissues in your body possess unique antigens that help identify themselves to your immune system. However, when someone receives an organ transplant, the antigens on the donor organ are recognized as foreign, and thus an immune response is initiated, which eventually leads to the rejection of that organ. As mentioned before, this process is normally reserved for fighting bacteria or viruses, but in this unique case, the immune system starts attacking the donor organ. There are 3 different types of organ rejections, all of whom vary depending upon how long it takes for the donor organ to be rejected. First, there's hyperacute organ rejection, which happens almost immediately. Second, there's acute organ rejection, which happens after a few weeks of receiving a donor organ. And finally, there's chronic organ rejection, which happens over a long period of time, typically years. After hearing all of this, you may be wondering, how can someone prevent organ rejection? Currently, the most common way of preventing organ rejection is through immunosuppressant medications, which artificially suppresses your immune system. Moving forward, the future of organ transplantation looks very bright. Currently, there is research being done which looks at the possible alternatives for organ transplantation, which may completely eliminate the possibility of organ rejection. The first is stem cell generated organs, which uses the recipient's own stem cells, which have the ability to differentiate into any cell in the body to replace damaged cells of an organ. The second is bioartificial organs, which use artificial materials to substitute the function of a deficient organ. Since these artificial materials do not have any antigens on their surfaces, the possibility of rejection is practically eliminated. That's all for this video. Thanks for watching, but please be sure to subscribe to the Demystifying Medicine YouTube channel for more videos.
Issue applied in Ecuador. By law, we are all donors. On March 4 in 2011, the Organic Law of the Nation and Transplantation of Organs, Tissues, and Cells came into force, the purpose of which is to guarantee the right to health in the matter of transplant through the regulation of activities related to the procurement and clinical use of organs, tissues, and cells. Also, with the promotion, donation, extraction, preparation, storage, transport, distribution, and transplantation. Conclusion. This topic talks about many important questions that are debatable. This involves the ethic of making judgment regarding other quality of life and to the science of cognitive impairment effect on post-transplantation survival.
Every year, many thousands of people receive the gift of life, a life-saving transplant of a heart, kidney, liver, lungs, pancreas, or intestines. And thousands more people receive corneas and other tissues that restore sight and health. Transplantation is one of the great medical advances of our time. How does it work? It all starts when someone's organ begins to fail, and that person will need a transplant to survive. A thorough evaluation is conducted at a transplant center, and if the person's a good candidate for a transplant, he or she will be put on the National Transplant Waiting List. Once a person is on the list, the wait for an organ begins. A national system matches people on the waiting list with donors. The factors considered in matching donors and recipients include blood type and body size, how sick the patient is, distance from the donor, tissue type, and length of time on the waiting list. What doesn't get taken into account? Organs are never matched based on race or gender. Income, celebrity, and social status are also never considered in matching donor organs to waiting patients. There's no telling how long the wait will take. In fact, some people don't receive an organ in time because the waiting list is very long and there aren't enough donors available. That's why an average of 20 people on the waiting list die each day. Imagine how many we could save if we all were donors. Most organs for transplants come from deceased donors. Here's how that happens. A person comes to the hospital with a life-threatening brain injury, such as from an accident, a stroke, or lack of oxygen. The doctors work hard to save the patient's life, but sometimes nothing can be done. There's a complete, irreversible loss of brain function. The patient is clinically and legally dead. That's when being a donor can turn a time of loss into a time of hope. Because machines have kept blood containing oxygen flowing to the organs, they can be passed along. One person can give life to as many as 8 people through organ donation and enhance the lives of 50 people or more through eye and tissue donation. But now, minutes matter. Matches must be found, and transplants must happen quickly. The hospital contacts an organ procurement organization, an OPO. OPOs manage the organ recovery process. The OPO checks the state organ donor registry. If the person is already registered as a donor, they'll inform the family. If not, they'll ask the family to authorize donation. A medical examination takes place. They check the medical and social history, and if the person is eligible to be an organ donor, the computer begins the search on the national waiting list for well-matched patients. The best matched patients for each organ are contacted by their transplant teams. This is the call that every single person on the waiting list has been hoping for. The call that could mean a second chance at life. Now the transplant happens. A surgical team recovers the organs, then corneas and other tissues. The organs are sent to the transplant hospitals where the patients and transplant teams are waiting, and the life-saving transplants take place. It will take healthy living and medications to keep the organ working well in its new home. But some wonderful person has given the most precious gift of all, the gift of life. You too can make the decision today to sign up on your state registry as an organ, eye, and tissue donor. Any age is the right age, young or old. And any day is the right day to sign up as a donor. You can register through your driver's license office, or you can sign up right now, online. Remember to tell your family so they can support your wishes. More than 145 million people have already signed up, but we're all needed to save more lives. Go to organdonor.gov and sign up in your state donor registry as an organ, eye, and tissue donor. Go to organdonor.gov and share the gift of life.
Thank you so much for watching. I hope you like it.